Hello everyone. Good. I know you're all enjoying your lunch. My answer kind of after lunch turn. I know some of you got to go do some driving stuff. Potentially far more interesting. I'm going to tempt the rest of you with the promise of technology, innovation and the future, and possibly even some texting sheet. So I've been working with technology, I work mostly with brands, so I can work with the user end of what you do. Just like you, I've been working in industry that is always about change. I first started putting out Macs into design studios in the 1980s. In the 90s, I got into online. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been working with mobile, but now I've moved on to other technologies in some of the emerging areas. And there's certain things that characterize innovation. And, well, let me ask you a question. So, a bit of audience participation here. So what if, after 8 minutes, GPS and Viagra all have in common? I'll ask somebody not So, the correct answer is that they were all, well, they weren't actually accidents. They were all unintended technologies. They were the results of other pieces of work. And I think this is a really key point, and it's this, it's simply that innovation comes from anyone, anywhere. And there should be no single person who's tasked with an organisation to deliver that innovation. The story of After Eight is quite interesting, if you like that sort of thing. So there was a 15-year-old guy who was doing the piping for the chocolates at the Roundtree factory, Black Magic. But what he actually noticed is if he left the fondant inside overnight, it would go hard. And a few days later, it would go soft again. And from that, he worked out you can roll it really flat, cover it in chocolate. And he suggested to their bosses, and they thought this was a great idea. And they created the After Eight Mint. So the idea that you will have mints after dinner did not exist until the 1960s. So this guy invented the whole concept of an after-dinner mint by this accidental discovery. Interestingly, he then went on to invent a lot of the sweets that have been open Roundtrees. He died just last month. He's called Brian Solid. Really interesting guy, and started in a very lonely position. The story of Viagra is just a classic accident. This was Pfizer who were testing a new heart drug. And they noticed it was a heart drug, which is great. They noticed this interesting and unusual side effects. One of the key points that I make about this is that it's really important with innovation, or with technologies, is to be prepared to fail, make mistakes, have accidents. These are really important things. If you work on the basis that everything is going to be a success, unfortunately you will never innovate. One of the things that you have to understand about innovation is it doesn't come from just a single light bulb moment. It is a process. It's a process that has gone for quite a while. The story of GPS is very interesting, because what happened in the 1950s is that the Soviets sent up Sputnik. The Americans were shocked about this because they thought they were going to be there first. And some scientists at the Department of Defense realised that Sputnik was giving out a signal, and they went and measured it. And they could actually hear Sputnik. They thought this was great. And then what they did is they applied some Doppler to it. And they realised using Doppler they could actually work out the position of the satellite as it was going around. And they went to their boss and they showed him what they'd done. Look, we didn't press a button, it will tell you exactly where it is. And the boss said, well, if you do it that way, can you do it the other way around? Can you use satellites to pinpoint something on Earth? So they went away. They had a look at it and they came back and they said, do you know what? We can do it and it's actually easier. And so that's great. So I've got a project to be able to locate things like submarines and aeroplanes. So that became the beginnings of GPS. But the key about this process was not the fact that it was used for the military, it was the fact that Ronald Reagan, not the brightest president, but one clever thing he did is he opened up GPS to allow all of us to use it, and it's now something that's embedded right in our mobile phones that we all have in our pockets. So the future is always interesting, it's always difficult. Part of my job is to try to predict the future, and you can't really predict it absolutely. One of the difficulties we have is based on this curve. So technology is moving exponentially, and I'm sure all of you know about Moore's law. Moore's law is the idea that computing power doubles every year. We'll eventually reach a point where computing power is basically at an atomic level, and it will get no better. But in terms of doubling, that means that things move much faster than you can ever imagine. Someone like these music industry got caught out. They saw the development of digital music, but what they thought it was to take about 20 years to happen. And the whole thing happened in about 3 to 5 years. If you look at television right now, it's about to come and hit them in exactly the same way. If you look at the YouTube channels with millions of subscribers, that's about to replace television. There is a logic to all of this technology. Some of you may have heard of something called the point of singularity. So eventually, things will just double in power until they reach that atomic level. It's estimated to reach that point in 2045. In that year, computing will become so powerful that it will gain its own intelligence and it will take over the world in a matrix kind of style. We have a little way to go there yet. And in order to get there, we have to go through something called the hype cycle. This has actually been measured, this is from Gartner. So what happens with the hype cycle is we go through all our great expectations, the things we're talking about right now, then we go through the trough of disappointment, and eventually right at the end here we actually get to something unusual. So stuff that's currently in the trough of disappointment, and I'll talk about some things like NFC technologies, augmented reality. These that are right at the top of the hype cycle now, and it's stuff you are probably hearing all the time. It's big data, it's wearable consumers, it's things like gamification, 3D printing. So I'm going to talk about a few of these to understand why they are at the top of the hype cycle. And I think one of the reasons is simply this, is that a lot of innovation focuses on the technology and doesn't really focus on solving problems. Well, stand this better. Let's talk about the current age of computing we're in right now, which is mobile computing. So, if you think about it, what's happening with mobile is it's become ubiquitous. So there are more mobile phones out there than people who have access to clean water. Smartphones are being bought about 3 times the rate that the babies are being born. Android is about double that of iOS. So we're becoming a mobile, smartphone world right now. And we're beginning to see some enhancements. There's a whole range of them, and again, you'll have heard of most of these, but we're seeing things like voice control. So Siri, Google have an offering, and lots of interesting things going on in the imaging side of it. It's got producing things like 360 cameras. The area that probably is most interesting is that of the interfaces, the screens themselves. So there's a whole range of new screens coming out that are flexible. You can wrap them around your wrist, you can bend them around and navigate around the screen just through flexing them. This is my favourite, it's something called a haptic screen. If you're not familiar with it, they've been working on this idea since the 1950s. And using tiny vibrations, you can actually create different textures, different senses. You can even create things like buttons in 3D, so you can have rough and you can have smooth. But the thing about all these enhancements is this, is that really fundamentally the smartphone is a smartphone. Apple can try all they like to develop new and interesting devices, but the real innovation was the iPhone. And in itself, the iPhone didn't innovate any new technologies. What it did is it brought a number of technologies that people like Nokia have been working on and put it in a beautifully assembled package. So where are we going to go from mobile? Well, again, the answer's been well talked about, and it is the wearable devices. So we've got things like this as Fitbit. I think many of you will have seen Night Fuel, for example. One of the key things about these wearable technologies is it's driven by cheap computing. So some of the ideas that I'm actually looking at right now is, can you put this kind of computing into, for example, pets? Can we create a Night Fuel for pets to monitor their exercise? Can we make their lives better as a result of that? The key thing is, at the moment, everything is kind of ubiquitous. If you think about your smartphone, it kind of has everything we want in it. We've got our emails, we've got our maps, we've got our music, we've got our GPS. With these, we're going to have a multitude of devices. So different people will choose to have different sorts of devices. I'm quite happy with things on my wrist. Not so sure about this stuff. This is Google Glass. There's a few really important things to remember about Google Glass. The first thing, and above all, is this is a prototype. When I was talking about you need to test stuff, you need to take risks. What Google does is they put this thing out there in the market. It has a battery life of about 2 hours. It doesn't work that well. And above all, it looks kind of ridiculous. But what they've done, they've said, look, this is the beta. We just want to put it out there. We want people to test it, see what the results are. And all credit to them for doing that. I don't know if I'm ever going to wear a pair of glasses. There's a lot of people out there who don't want us wearing Google Glass. They did a study in San Francisco recently. They found that 20% of people would like Google Glass banned in public. And there is clearly a movement against it in terms of privacy. The other slightly scary thing about Google Glass is actually, in order for it to work, it has to track your eye movements. Now, eye movements are unconscious. So if that data is being uploaded to the cloud, the problem we have with Google Glass is the unconscious information is being sent off into the cloud, being sent over IP. And if you only look at what happened with the NSA, that can be quite a dangerous position. Look at what happened with Tesco this week with their facial recognition. Even though this is anonymized data, nonetheless as consumers, we don't like it at all. As well as the wearables, the other phase of computing are the connected devices and the Internet of Things. Again, it's something you've probably all heard mentioned a number of times, but just to give you an idea of where this is going, the Internet of Things, the estimate is that by 2020 we will have 6 connected devices for every human. And the idea is it's going to be your fridge, it's going to be your television, it's going to be your washing machine. And they're going to be able to talk to you. There's a guy who's already done this. If you want to go and look at it, it's quite an interesting Twitter feed. It's called House of Coats. And he's got all of his house tweeting away. The plants tweet when they need water, the lights tweet when they need to be turned off, and all those kinds of things. But to me, that's not really the interesting bit about the connected devices. The interesting thing is when they start talking to each other. So if you think about connected cars, and we're going to see a new wave of this coming through very soon. You've got things like collision avoidance. Now that's a one-way process, but if cars are actually talking to each other, then they can actually do a lot more interesting things. You can have self-driving cars, you can have trains and cars moving down the road. The other area that also gets very interesting is when things like health. So this is a device called Scanadu. Some of you may be familiar with the X Prize. So there was an X Prize for the first reusable spacecraft, which was one a few years ago. The next one is to invent a tricorder. Tricorders from Star Trek is the thing that Dr. Bones uses, he scans over, and he can diagnose illness. So this is a device that actually hooks up to a smartphone, and it can diagnose 10 major life signs, so things like temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, all uninvasive. And that then connects to your iPhone, and if necessary, you can send that information back to the medical professionals. It's likely that they will win the X Prize for the tricorder this year. But when it comes to this new generation of computing, it's really important to understand that actually do not rely on the old leaders, the old systems. Just for example, mainframe, very much the world of IBM. Microsoft led in the world of PC. Apple have done it in the world of mobile, and I know Samsung are doing very well right now. But in terms of people who are actually innovating and pushing forward, it was these 3 companies. Somebody said to me, even quite recently, somebody said nobody ever lost money, and nobody ever lost their job by Microsoft. But I don't know, for the next generation, it's unlikely to be any of these 3. It will be someone different. It might possibly be Samsung. It might be someone like Huawei, Chinese manufacturer. So you need to be prepared to understand that innovation is going to come from all kinds of places. I've kind of mentioned this already, but I think it's worth reiterating it. When it comes to innovation, when it comes to understanding technologies, the solution will always be focusing on the problem and not the solution. What do I mean by that? Well, if you focus on the solution, you end up focusing on technology and not the people that you're trying to deliver that to. And NFC is a really good example of that. So NFC, contactless, is something that actually is quite a good technology that we've had for many years. It's great for transportation, for Oyster cards, it's great for getting in and out of pools. But for the last few years, they've been trying to put it into mobile phones, both as a form of payment, but also as a form of passing information around. The problem is that as consumers, we're just not that bothered. If you think about it, NFC in a mobile phone doesn't really solve any problems for me. What I want to be able to do when I go to Tesco is to be able to get my smartphone out, do all of my shopping, do the payment from there, and then just simply leave the store. Starbucks are already beginning to do that. So 10% of all the Starbucks sales come through people actually doing the whole thing on their smartphones. And when you consider they are a physical store, people need to go in and buy things from, go to the till, that's really quite amazing. So things like payment within the smartphone is the future. One of the things on our hype cycle are drones. So again, driven by cheap computing, we have these autonomous flight machines that can fly around. And there's some really great work being done with drones, and they can do these amazing things. When brands try and solve a problem using drones, what they came up with is we can have drones delivering beer to people at festivals. But this is someone who's really focused on the problem. It's a group of people in Australia. What they realise is Australia being quite a remote country, if somebody has a medical problem, how do you deal with it? So they're beginning to develop drones that can actually deliver defibrillators to remote places. And they don't even have to be that remote. I mean, here's a golf course, but it could be mountains and things like that. And this is where focusing on a problem rather than a solution is a much better way to work this through. Now, the way that drones are going, eventually what we'll be having is little groups of drones that can actually create buildings. So they'll come as a little swarm, and they'll create different forms of buildings in ways that we haven't seen before. But right now, people are doing this sort of thing. This leads us to the connected sheep and the bone way. So yeah, Internet of Things is kind of interesting when I connect to the fridge. But again, here's a way of solving problems. And it's really quite a simple way. So what they did in Switzerland is they connected a small EEG sensor, a brain sensor, up to sheep flocks. When a wolf is in the area, the brain activity pattern increases massively. At that point, a small GSM card in the sheep sends a text to the shepherd to tell them there's a wolf in the area. Yeah, no, they didn't do it with the hooves, if that's what you're thinking. Same kind of thing with cows. So what they've done, and Cisco I know have been involved with some of this, is to be able to connect sensors to cows. And in this case, they can actually measure their temperature. When a cow is in heat, so ready for fertilization, it's able to contact the farmer through his smartphone, and as well as saying that it's ready to be inseminated, it gives a GPS position, the farmer does what the farmer needs to do. Each cow uploads, I think, about 250 megabytes of data a year, and again, it's a good use of cloud computing is connecting all this stuff together. The interesting thing about cows and where it's solving a problem is, in the trials they've done in Austria, they found that calf production goes up by about 6-fold. In a world of increasingly scarce resources, that is a very, very useful thing. Here's another one from the hype cycle, big data. Somebody once described, slightly risque way of putting it, but I'll explain, big data is like teenage sex. A lot of people are talking about it, but not many people are actually doing it. I found it hard to find people who give me a good description of big data. I will give you my description of big data. Somebody once said, well, big data is just more data than the computer can handle. The way I describe it is different. It's this. It's taking a multitude of data points, often anonymized data, taking that information and producing a completely different result. I'll give you an example. So, the problem with mosquitoes is they'll spread malaria because mosquitoes can't go very far. They can't go very far. And what happens is they hop on people, they attach to their clothes, they attach to their bags. So what they've been able to do in Kenya is to actually look at the movement of cell phones across the different cells, and they can actually monitor the movement of people. From that, they're able to see the areas where they need to do the anti-malaria vaccination, with the aim of actually having an impact on the level of malaria there. They've done something similar as well, also in Kenya, using big data, and again, and what they've been able to do this time is to measure mobile phone top-ups. So just about everybody in Kenya is on a pay-as-you-go phone. By creating heat maps over the country of mobile phone top-ups, they can actually see where the real wealth is, and where the poor areas are. They've discovered some interesting stuff. There's some really odd areas where there seem to be massive amounts of phone activity going on, lots of mobile top-ups. And what it turned out is these were areas where there was a lot of smuggling and contraband going on. So it can really help. One of the projects that I'm actually working on goes a little bit further than that. I don't even know whether it's big data or whether it's just about computing power. So there are nearly 1.5 billion smartphones out there. And it kind of occurred to me, what if you could use the massive computing power of those to solve really big problems? So things like, so I'm now looking at how can we use those to solve diseases like cancer and degenerative diseases like Parkinson's. These are the things that we're now getting on with. And in fact, what you realise is that if you could somehow create a massive group computer and link everybody together, and we would donate little bits of our data, you can do amazing things with it. So, I guess no technology presentation would be complete without talking about robotics and AI. And this is one of these areas where we're kind of struggling a little bit. There are some really amazing advances with the world of robotics. There's some guys in America who've created these tiny little robots that again work together with swarms, and what they've done is they can autonomously go out into somewhere like the desert, and they can actually assemble a pipeline all on their own and come all the way back home. This is probably my favourite example of robotics, and this is James, the robot that has learned how to make pancakes. What's interesting, it uses pancake mix, so I kind of think it's cheating style. What is interesting about this robot is the fact that it taught itself to do this. So they sat it down and stood it in front of a WikiHow video on how to make pancakes. And using its artificial intelligence, it worked out, it filled in all the gaps. So the WikiHow didn't tell it they had to go to the fridge and get the pancake mix out. It worked all that out, joined the dots, and it can actually make pancakes. Go and watch it, it's a YouTube video. I don't think they taste great, but it's interesting to see where we're going. One of the problems that we do have, though, is that although the development of computing power is going to do some really interesting, innovative stuff for us, I think we're a long, long way off artificial intelligence. One of the biggest problems that we have to deal with, so we can create robots that do tasks, simple tasks, relatively well, make pancakes, assemble pipelines, that kind of thing. But the biggest problem we have is we understand very little about the brain. But we can only define it in terms of neurons firing. What we haven't yet defined is actually what constitutes intelligence. And I'll give you an example of that. If you think of the least intelligent thing, let's say it's an amoeba, and the most intelligent thing is Einstein, on a scale. The difference between Einstein and the village idiot is relatively small. And we don't even know what that is. And we're barely able to create robots with an intelligence approaching a domestic dog. So perhaps, and there's some of us who believe this, that by 2045 we won't actually be creating artificial intelligence. Certainly our smartphone will be 1 billion times more powerful, and it will be the size of a blood cell. But I don't think, fortunately, we're yet at the point where we can create enough intelligence for machines to take over the world. I suppose the best way to finish this, really, is with a really simple example about actually sometimes the best way to innovate is to take away the technology from people. This example from Japan. So how do you get people to slow down on public roads? When you're out here, you're driving as fast as you like. But how do you get them to slow down on public roads? We've tried the punishment, cameras. One of the things they do here recently is they put little speeds, that kind of works. They put smileys. Interestingly, if you put a little smiley on the screen, it actually causes people to slow down more than if you actually put the speed. What they did in Japan is they gave this problem over to an artist. So an artist didn't think in terms of a technology solution, but he came up with the musical rumble strips. The idea behind the musical rumble strips is if you drive over them at the right speed, they play a tune. Drive over the wrong speed, you can't hear the tune. So what you're doing is actually rewarding people for good behaviour. So, as I say, you're going to go off and you're going to innovate something. And hopefully you're going to think and focus on what is the problem that you want to achieve, and through that, it will deliver you a solution. I guess the really important thing I would say to just finish this is to say, when they look back at this era, we are going to be the most innovative period possibly in human history. We think of the Renaissance, we talk about art, Victorian times about engineering. When we look back right now, millennium onwards, we will be seen as the great innovators. And I think in terms of the business that you are doing, all of you are right at the heart of that. And I think you have the potential to be at the centre of this massively innovative period. So I would just say, go and do it. Thank you for listening.